my name is Daryl, and this is Programming in Any Language. We're working with C# right now, but the principles are the same in all languages. Master these principles, and you can easily jump to any other language quickly. Well, the intro video showed us a loop. A plane goes around in a circle once. They call that a loop, and indeed it is. But when it comes to loops in programs, a Ferris wheel or a merry-go-round might make a better analogy. That's because loops in programs allow us to do tasks over and over again virtually indefinitely. Although the indefinitely piece is a problem in programming. We'll address that in this section. Let's look at those bubbles and circles we examined way back at the Intro to Decision Structure section. And remember that there's a square up there as well. The square, as you may remember, represents why we program in the first place. It's to solve a problem of some kind, problem solving. And before we use any of our programming tools, we do the problem solving first. That leaves us with all those bubbles up there. Things we're covering one at a time. Those are the tools found in all programming languages that we will use in solving our problems. And each of those bubbles represents many different tools, all of which are categorized by the name found in the bubble. You can see data storage, arrays, methods, loops, object-oriented programming, or OOP, and so on. We'll get to all of these later. And we just finished with decisions, so that tool is available to us now. We can start using it. We understand it. And we also know all about variables. We learned to do math on them way back when. We learned to convert them to different data types. We've learned to concatenate string variables. We've learned how to use them with controls. And we've learned some of those controls as well. We've learned all about labels, buttons, text boxes, and the list box, and so on. All those controls have allowed us to set up forms using a graphical user interface, the GUI, GUI. Controls, variables, and the GUI are things we've covered up to now, which pretty much form the groundwork or the foundation for everything that comes next. And we've added decisions. So now our programs can branch off in other directions. For example, we can calculate gross pay for a normal 40-hour week for an employee. And with the power of decision logic, we can add in overtime pay if needed. If the person worked more than 40 hours, we can calculate that. Decisions give us that flexibility. But we can only do it once. For each employee, we'd have to run the program again. That limits us. Computers were designed to do boring, repetitive tasks. They're great at doing that. And that brings us to loops. Behind me, you can see a list of the topics I've thrown together which belong to the loop structure world today, which we'll be taking a look at. You'll note that this is not as extensive as decision topics. There's basically 3 loop types and a couple of operators. You'll notice the while loop. This type of loop will repeatedly execute a block of code as long as a certain condition is true. Once the condition turns false, the loop ends. It's done. Below the while loop, you'll find the for loop. This is an oldie but goodie, been around forever in most languages. Loved it. This loop executes a block of code repeatedly for a specified number of times. You set a parameter, 10, 20, 100, whatever, and it'll do it that many times. This type of loop is very adaptable to all kinds of circumstances. Following it is a do-while loop. This is similar to the while loop, except that it will always execute a block of code at least once, as it doesn't check for true-false until it has executed the block of code once. It's not used as much as the other two, but it has its place when the need arises. When does the need arise? We'll learn that as well. The plus plus and minus minus operators can be used in the for loop to increment or decrement a counter. There's other ways to do that too, but the plus plus and minus minus are nice shorthand ways of doing it. Infinite loops. Those are the things we as programmers have to avoid. Infinite loops are loops that never end. That means your program never ends. You want to avoid these, but they do happen when you say, forget to increment a counter in a for loop. You're telling it to go to 10, but you forget to say 10, and it keeps on going forever, looking for that last number. The block of code gets executed forever. This section is easy to learn. 3 types of loops. And when you use each one, that depends on what you're trying to accomplish. You'll see that as we use these loops, it'll become apparent. That will happen in the upcoming videos. Get ready for a good ride. We're going to master all of these loops. And we'll master them quickly. They're easy to learn. What you need to take out of this video is the loop structure is but one major programming topic. There are 3 distinct types of loops. The loop structure allows us to repeat code an unlimited number of times. That's what it's all about. Well, see you next time. Thanks for watching. And if you get a chance, please subscribe. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.